Michael Finkel, a creative and exceptional journalist working for the New York Times, interviews some boys dressed in tattered clothes. They seem like slaves or people subjected to hard labor. Michael Finkel, with the help of an interpreter, talks to a particular boy trying to get information. The boy remains silent despite the message Michael passed through the interpreter. Tired of their silence and desperate to get some information, he brings out $1 and promises to give it to the boy if he provides him with some information. This strategy works as the boy begins to talk and answers questions of Michael. Michael in turn writes briefly on his jotter and looks at the boys. He gives him the $1 before leaving. Meanwhile, a man named Christian Longo, identifying as Michael Finkel, is arrested in Mexico by the police, after they discover his wife and 3 children got killed. Michael is invited to a serious discussion by his boss at the New York Times, for writing a controversial article about some slaves. The article generated lots of reactions from the public. They questioned him about writing without enough research. Michael tried to defend himself but finally accepted he had made some part up. He explains that he is trying to do something good, but his boss doesn't believe him, and they fire him. Michael returns to be with his wife, Jill. In the meantime, he calls his friends and associates, trying to get them to support or work on a project with him. They are not buying in, as the mistakes he made in the New York Times still stood out. They weren't willing to risk at this time. Michael receives a call from a journalist named Pat, who wants his side of story about Christian Longo. Michael is stunned because he doesn't know any Christian Longo, and was clueless about having a connection with him. The reporter is also surprised because, apart from the fact it's a trending case, Christian Longo claimed to be him, Michael Finkel. Michael is surprised by this revelation. He does some research on his computer and realizes that Pat was saying the truth. Michael got curious seeing that news, and schedules a meeting with Pat, who is a big fan of Michael. He meets with Michael in a restaurant, and they discuss. Pat tells Michael all he knows about the case. He explained how Christian was caught, the way his wife died, and expressed his love for Michael's writing. He allowed Michael to keep the document on Christian Longo's case. Michael writes to Longo, asking to meet with him in the prison. He explains his situation since he was fired at the New York Times, and how he felt when he realizes he was using his name. Longo accepts Michael's letter to meet with him. Michael visits Longo in the prison. They discuss trivial issues before getting into the main deal. Longo informs Michael that many broadcasting corporation has been coming to hear his story, but he refused. He tells Michael that he wants his story to be told, and he will tell Michael his side of the story, and in return Longo wants 2 things. The first thing is, he needs his word that he won't tell anyone what he tells him until after the trial. In return, he will give him exclusive access to the story. Michael asks about the second thing, and Longo asks him to teach him how to write. Longo writes a letter titled, "All the Way Things Have Gone Wrong." In the letter, he tells Michael about his life from his childhood to his immediate late family. He mentioned his church, saying it's a good thing for him, as he met his wife there. The letter also includes some bits of information on his workplace and ended with short info on the night his family died. Michael prepares to leave for some time, and his wife Jill asks him some questions about Longo's case. Michael tells her the name of Longo's wife, Mary Jane, and his daughter Madison, who he revealed was 2 years old. Jill kisses him and bids him farewell. Michael arrives at the bay, where Madison and Mary Jane were found dead, and Pat shows him where the bodies were dropped. According to Pat, Mary Jane and Madison were beaten, strangled, and then put in a suitcase and dumped inside the canal. He said by pointing to the exact place it happened. It was so easy because Christian Longo's house was close to the canal. As the suitcase sank, it broke the water pipe, leading to a search that reveals the 2 bodies. The other children were dumped in a river in the next town, which is 15 miles away from where Mary Jane and Madison were dumped. During the discussion, Michael reveals he met Christian Longo. Pat asked why, and he replied he wanted to hear his story. Pat objects to this, saying Longo doesn't deserve a story, but Michael insists everyone deserves a story. Michael reviews some footage and records of Longo. He pays Longo another visit, and informs him that his story would be a book instead of his usual article. Longo was happy about this, and tells Michael how much he admires his use of words. Michael teaches Longo something about writing. He further inquired if he killed his family. Longo replies that he loves his family, and using suspense, refused to tell Michael what happened. Michael asks one more time, and Longo replied he didn't kill her. Michael keeps visiting Longo, and this time Longo reviewed and examined some things he wrote in the letter. He discusses Madison's toys and the financial challenge he faced, which prevented him from getting her new toys. Michael's visits to Longo became more frequent. Sometimes he taught him how to write, and sometimes he discussed the case and the letters, and kept asking Longo to tell him the truth, which Longo smartly continued to evade. He tells Michael about his wife, who he describes as an ocean. Michael is starting to see some similarities between Longo and him. Similarities in terms of handwriting. Michael is even starting to believe that Longo is innocent. Michael is excited about the story. He feels it's the biggest thing of his life and announces he will name the book, True Story, while on the phone with the publisher. Michael keeps digging, making research, and making calls to get all the pieces together. On a visit to Longo just before he appeared before the court for trial, Michael revealed that he intentionally wrote the story that made his boss fire him. He was trying to get a nice story, and he intentionally did it. Michael was so passionate about telling a great story that he made mistakes. He said this to make Longo say the truth and not cover it up. Thinking Longo is innocent, Christian Longo appears in court to start his trial. In the court, he is presented with the death of his family, his wife and 3 daughters, to which he pleads guilty to 2 and not guilty to the other 2. This annoys Michael, who finds it absurd. This new turnout of events causes changes in his book publication. The publishers want something reliable. Greg Ganley, the cop who tracked Christian Longo's meetings with Michael, asking him for some information. He asks Michael to tell him what he has been discussing with Longo, so it could be used against him. Gray tells Michael that Longo is extremely manipulative, exceptionally dangerous, and has killed before and will also kill again. Despite this, Michael refuses to reveal information, because he made a promise to Christian to keep everything a secret until after the trial. Gray leaves Michael alone after his tactics didn't work. Meanwhile, Longo tried to reach Michael but couldn't reach him, so instead, he spoke with his wife. He informed her that his lawyer can secure a spot for Michael in court. He discusses with her for some time before hanging up. In the court, some witnesses were interviewed about the death of Longo's family. They all testified against him, sharing their story in court. The lawyer reviews the kind of murder Longo's family experienced. Starting from his wife, Mary Jane, down to Madison. Using a projector, it was displayed in the court for all to see. The picture of their death was so touching and painful that the people in the court expressed sympathy and cried. It was a wicked, painful death carried out by a wicked person. The judge adjourned the case. The next day, Longo is questioned in court, and he explains his side of the story. According to him, the night before he killed his family, Longo came clean with his wife, where he reveals he didn't pay the rent for their place, and got credit cards by forging her father's signature, and stealing their van. Mary Jane was shaken by the revelation, and she hit him when he told her about the van. As she kept screaming, he left the room and joined the little kids. The next day, he went to work because they were in a deep financial crisis. After work, he went home to find the door open and Mary Jane in her robe sobbing, refusing to answer his question. This irritates and infuriates him. Nevertheless, he leaves to remove his coat only to see Madison, who is cold and looks sick. Longo holds the wife to ask her what happened, and Jane blames the whole disaster on him. In a bid to force her to talk, he kills her. Going back to the room, he discovers Madison, although looking dead, but was still breathing. Longo, judging that she was still breathing, he held her neck and squeezed the life out of her. Because the suitcase was so big for only Madison, he put some of her belongings in the suitcase along with her favorite teddy bear, then threw it into the canal. Then he sat there thinking of his children. After hearing his story, the judge adjourned the case to the next days. Michael, knowing something was wrong somewhere, so he met with Gray and tried to deliver some materials which were evidence against Longo. Gray thus rejects evidence. Meanwhile, Jill visits Longo in the prison. She watched his confession during the court session and was furious. Jill plays a classic song for Longo. She explained the history behind the artist of the song. A man who tracked his wife with her lover, killed the wife, the lover, and then killed his son. Jill calls Longo a narcissist. The next day, the jury presents the judgment of Christian Longo. He was guilty of every charge and sentenced to death. Just before dismissing the court, the judge slams Longo for trying to manipulate the court as he did to his family. He would have saved the relatives further pain by admitting to the charges, but he refused despite the evidence against him, thinking they would believe his story. Michael realizes he has been played, and visits Longo in the prison. He asks Longo if he is ready to tell the truth. Longo fabricates another story, claiming not to remember what happened. Michael yells at him for lying and for being a murderer. Michael realized he was used and that Longo fooled him. The movie ends with Michael reading his book to a crowd at what seems like a launching. After reading, applause followed, and then few questions. A particular question made him speechless. The question says, "Christian Longo has lost his liberty, I wonder what you have lost as well." Michael imagined the face of Longo on the person asking the question. He didn't answer the question as he stood frozen and shocked. 1 year later, Christian Longo admitted to killing his entire family. From death row, he has contributed articles to several publications including the New York Times. Mike and Christian Longo still speak on the first Sunday of every month. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.